This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Wendy Griffith. Lawmakers in Vermont have voted to amend their state constitution to protect abortion at any stage of pregnancy for any reason. Our Charlene Aaron has been following the story and joins us now in the newsroom with more. Charlene.
That's right, Wendy. The amendment called Proposal 5 passed both chambers of the state legislature. According to the Catholic News Agency, the amendment aims to recognize as a fundamental right the freedom of reproductive choice and to prohibit public entities from interfering with or restricting the right of an individual to terminate the individual's pregnancy. Democratic lawmakers in the state say the measure is needed to protect legalized abortion in Vermont and actually goes beyond New York's late-term abortion bill by giving blanket permission for all abortions. A handful of states have recently enacted laws that ban abortion if a fetal heartbeat is detected, which can occur as early as 6 weeks. Tom McCluskey of March for Life Action says those gains in the pro-life movement have abortion advocates afraid.
I think what we're seeing both in New York and Vermont, as well as Alabama and Georgia, as well and other states, is there's an optimism in the pro-life movement and a pessimism now in the pro-abortion movement. They're seeing the changes at the federal level, especially with the Supreme Court. They're seeing the actions that President Trump is doing. And they're seeing after 47 years of Roe v. Wade and the devastation that it's caused, that it's time to fight back and fight back harder. And it's time to end the scourge of abortion.
Now, before Vermont's amendment can become law, the state legislature would need to pass the bill again next year, and voters would need to approve it in a 2022 referendum. Wendy, back to you.
Thanks so much, Charlene. Well, the trade war between China and the U.S. continues to escalate. White House officials today listed $300 billion more of Chinese goods for possible tariff hikes. This just one day after Beijing announced hikes on $60 billion of American goods. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise says President Trump is acting in the interests of Americans.
Ultimately, we've seen the American economy suffer because China doesn't play by the rules. They don't comply with trade agreements. They steal our intellectual property. And we've been in a trade war with China for a long time. I'm glad that President Trump is standing up to them. I'd like to see it resolved quickly. I think we all would. But at the same time, I think it's important that America is treated fairly and that tariffs are dropped on both sides because we finally come to an agreement that can properly be enforced.
The two governments have given themselves a few more days to agree on a deal before their latest tariff hikes hit. Attorney General William Barr has appointed a U.S. attorney to examine how the Russia investigation was conceived. John Durham, the U.S. attorney in Connecticut, will conduct the inquiry. Durham will determine if intelligence officials investigating the Trump campaign was lawful and appropriate. Speaking to reporters outside the White House today, the president says he was not aware in advance of Barr's probe, but he's thankful.
I saw it last night, and they want to look at how that whole hoax got started. It was a hoax. And even Mueller, not a friend of mine, even Bob Mueller came out, no collusion. And he had 18 people that didn't like Donald Trump. They were Hillary Clinton fans. They contributed, many of them, to Hillary Clinton. They came out. It was the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the people of this country. And you know what? I am so proud of our Attorney General that he is looking into it. I think it's great.
We'll have more on this story and others on Faith Nation this evening. You can watch it right here on the CBN News Channel. Well, this week, lawmakers in Washington are considering the Equality Act. If passed, the bill would amend the Civil Rights Act to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. CBN's Heather Sells spoke with Doreen Denny, Senior Director of Government Relations for Concerned Women for America, for more on the issue.
I understand that lawmakers have voted this bill out of committee and that it could go up for a vote on the House floor this week. Tell us what the latest is.
Yeah, we're expecting a vote on the House floor on Friday this week. It's interesting that the House is just kind of doing this on a Friday, because usually when they want to get a lot of attention for something, they might do that in the middle of the week. But that's not the case in this case.
Okay. And the president of your organization, Concerned Women for America, recently wrote an op-ed piece with Natasha Chart, the board chair of the Women's Liberation Front, to oppose the Equality Act. Talk about this unusual alliance and the concern that both groups have about this bill.
Well, I will. And you know, it's interesting, like I mentioned, with Congress wanting to make this a signature piece, they are probably starting to feel the heat with organizations like ours joining together, because what this bill will be is an injustice for the women of America. This is not the Equality Act for women. In fact, it's going to discriminate against women, because by allowing for gender identity to be put into federal law as a protected class, you're essentially erasing protections for women. This bill would allow for any biological man to have access to any place, any space, our sports competitions, just by saying that he wants to identify as being a woman. And there is no standard for this. So any man that decides he wants to say that he's a woman at any time could enter our dressing rooms, our bathrooms, our dorm rooms. And this is the thing that's a travesty for American women. Congress should be passing laws that protect women, not putting us at risk.
What has it been like working with this radical feminist group? Yeah, I'm sure you never expected to be collaborating with them.
Well, you know, what you realize is that at such a time as this, that there are people, or there are groups that might be, you know, quite apart on many issues who have similar interests. And in this case, the women's feminists in this case believe that women should be protected, believe that females and the female status that we've shared over the years, everything that we've gained for the last 40 years in law shouldn't be erased and undone by a law that's going to allow for any man to claim that he's a woman. So we find ourselves very much in partnership with this group. They're lovely people that we've been working with, and we're looking forward to having this statement be made loud and clear as the Congress is debating the bill this week.
Really interesting. And how do you gauge things overall right now in terms of support, opposition to this? Are you hearing from other women's groups on this issue?
Well, we certainly are. In fact, the Independent Women's Forum, Independent Women's Voice, is with us on this. They represent a lot of women who are not just conservatives, but also women across the spectrum. We have other organizations that are joining in with this who are, again, representing women's concerns and women's views. You know, the American people do not want an extreme bill that would do something as severe as change our fundamental civil rights laws around sex, to impose a new conforming agenda, or something that the American people are going to have to conform to, which is really an ideology about gender identity. You know, it's time that we really stand firm against this kind of radicalism. And, you know, all the Democrats have jumped on this bill. I mean, maybe that's not a surprise. It's a signature priority of Nancy Pelosi. In the Senate, similarly, all the Democrats have jumped on this bill. But we've challenged them on this point that we're talking about, erasing females, and they have no answer for this. So we believe that by joining together, linking arms across the aisle, across the spectrum, political spectrum and the ideological spectrum, like we have with the Women's Liberation Front, this should be sending America to not only to Congress, but to the American people.
All right, Doreen Denny, fascinating politics in Washington this week. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Sure is. Thanks, Heather. Well, coming up, how one family in their church coped with a shocking revelation about their dad and pastor.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I Wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Last week, Pope Francis issued a new church law that requires Catholic priests and nuns to report clergy sexual abuse. It's expected to trigger an avalanche of reports around the world. In Protestant churches, however, it seems awareness of abuse is only beginning. With that in mind, CBN News is featuring a special report this week called Pedophile in the Pulpit, and reporter Heather Sells is here now to talk more about it. Heather?
Yeah, that's right, Wendy. And you can watch this half-hour special for 4 nights this week at 8:30 p.m. starting tomorrow night. It is the story of the Hinton family and how the family and their church coped with the shocking revelation that their dad and pastor was abusing children. We're going to show you a 4-minute clip from the show right now. It looks at how Pastor John Hinton was able to keep his abuse a secret for so many years.
Clara and John Hinton married in 1970 at the small Christian college where they met, and 2 years later they moved east to start their dream ministry.
We were kids when we moved to Somerset, Pennsylvania. We were 22 years old. I had prayed from a young child up for a Christian husband. That's all I ever wanted, was a Christian husband, and I wanted to be a Christian wife and mother.
John became pastor of the Church of Christ, and they went on to have a large family, 11 children.
He was very relaxed and very calm, very kind. He was great with the kids. He was their go-to person. He was my spiritual leader. We would spend many hours talking about God and our faith.
She and many others considered John to be a super dad. Their 5th son, Jimmy, adored his dad, and as he grew older, began to appreciate his ministry.
I remember sitting in the pews here and hearing him preach and hearing the passion behind it, and he just knew his Bible really well. And I just remember thinking, I want to be standing up there one day. I want to be making a difference in the world one day.
Both dreams would come true, but not in the way Jimmy had hoped. Even as Clara and Jimmy perceived an ideal family, John Hinton kept a double life hidden that neither ever suspected, although Clara did struggle to understand some of his behavior.
He would just do off-the-wall things. For instance, he would be preaching and do really weird things. He threw a lit firecracker in the auditorium one morning, and it's like, why do you do this stuff?
Another time, one of their daughters found him locked in his office looking at pornography. He later said he was doing sermon prep. But one of his victims was growing up, and at age 20 realized not only had Hinton abused her, he was likely abusing others. That victim was Hinton's youngest daughter.
I saw this picture of my dad touching me in an inappropriate way, but it was one of those things that I would try to play it off like, oh, he wouldn't actually do that to me. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe I'm not remembering something correctly, or yeah, I just kept trying to brush it off.
But when he asked her to help him babysit, she could no longer brush it off.
One of the kids had said that she loved spending the night at his house. And she had asked him that day, are we spending the night at your house tonight, Mr. John? And can we sleep in your bed?
Alex began to research and discovered her dad matched the profile of an abuser, and she matched the profile of a victim. But should she tell? After weeks of indecision, she went to her mom.
At that moment, it was like a million light bulbs went off. because so many little fragments of things that happened all along the years.
It became clear that they must tell Jimmy, son, brother, and current pastor of the church. Alex made an appointment to meet him.
It just takes the breath away from you. And I looked up and she was crying and I started to cry. I said, I believe you. And I think she needed to hear that. And the way I describe it is, I really think that was the Holy Spirit putting those words on my lips in that moment, because I really think she had to hear that.
Heather, this is such an incredible and heartbreaking story, and this is really just a part of it, right?
Yeah, this is just one segment. We were so taken by it that we decided to expand it into a half-hour show.
Yeah.
And it really goes beyond just the Hinton family story to talk about churches and how churches can respond to this issue of abuse. That special, again, will air for 4 nights this week at 8:30 p.m. on the CBN News Channel starting this Wednesday.
Well, this happened, this denomination was a Church of Christ, but this is happening in other denominations, and they're starting to look into it, aren't they?
Right. I think a lot of Protestants used to see it as a Catholic problem.
Right.
And now I think there's an awareness that, no, it's right here, too. What I'm really watching is the Southern Baptists right now. They have a task force that's high profile. They've put a lot of money into it, and they are starting to issue recommendations. They're saying people in seminaries have to be trained. They want churches to train. They want churches to more closely look at the background check process, the ordination process. So there's a lot of thought being given to this, and this is the largest Protestant denomination. Southern Baptists are 15 million strong. So what they do matters, and they're having an annual meeting this June, as always, but they will really be focusing on this issue this year.
Wow, this is such an important story. I'm so glad it's become a series this week, and we appreciate your reporting on this. And people can see it on the CBN News Channel.
Yes.
Well, still ahead, there are decisions you make every day without putting a whole lot of thought into them, but one doctor says you need to realize they're really life and death decisions. We'll hear from Dr. Andrew Lee about why what you eat is so important.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man coming.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Welcome back. Well, how much thought do you put into deciding what to eat or drink? One doctor says these are literally life and death decisions. Lori Johnson talked to Dr. William Lee, author of the new book, Eat to Beat Disease, which lists 200 of the healthiest foods.
So tell us, why do you say our fork is one of our greatest health tools?
Well, as a medical doctor, I can tell you that medicines are very powerful to treat diseases, but foods are even more powerful because they can prevent diseases to begin with.
So you have in this book, which is fantastic, about 200 different foods and their different medicinal properties, but you've isolated these 5 right here. What's so special about these?
Well, before we talk about the foods, I just want to point out the fact that in my book, I talk about the way that foods and health actually work together. It's not just about the food, it's about how our body responds to what we put in it. And we have these health defense systems that actually govern whether we stay healthy or we get sick. And foods can activate it. And so I've put 200 foods that allow us to choose which foods activate our health. And that's what we have in front of us.
Fantastic. So you love tomatoes, but not just any tomatoes, right?
Well, foods are not all created equal. And I love tomatoes because they're not only a source of vitamins, but they also contain this natural chemical called lycopene, which actually cuts off the blood supply that can feed cancer and right-size our circulation. And in my book, I write about a study of almost 40,000 men who are eating 2 to 3 servings of cooked tomatoes, and they have a reduced risk of developing prostate cancer. I like San Marzano tomatoes, as an example, because they contain more of that lycopene. Other tomato types that actually are good are cherry tomatoes because they're tiny and potent. And then there's something called the tangerine tomato that's actually almost orangish colored. And so not all tomatoes were made the same. Pick the ones that actually are the most potent.
So when you talk about cooked tomatoes, I mean, it's something as simple as tomato sauce.
That's right. Something that, you know, has been used for hundreds of years that we all enjoy. This is health that we can actually lean into, that we love to put into our lives. And that's what I focus my book on, is what can we add to our lives based on science, not just what to cut out.
Do you need to eat them every day for the benefits?
Well, it depends on the different foods. The key is diversity. We want to actually be able to eat as widely as possible, and we want to eat because we enjoy what we're doing. It's so hard to deny ourselves things. That's why diets that are one size fits all and that ask you to cut things out of your life actually are so difficult to maintain.
And we know that when someone says don't eat something, you want to eat it even more. So talk about the bread. And that's another thing. We thought bread was on the don't eat list.
Right. Well, this is where science is helping us refocus our attention. And it's not just every bread. I actually have, in my book, talk about pumpernickel bread and sourdough bread. Let's talk about pumpernickel. It's actually made with rye flour. And rye flour is a type of grain. We know whole grains are good for you, that actually lowers the level of a unhealthy bacteria that can be in our gut that produces a toxin that causes inflammation. So eating pumpernickel bread can lower that bacteria, lower inflammation. Sourdough bread, which, you know, I love sourdough bread.
Me too, and it smells great, by the way.
You know, it's got that nice tangy taste to it. Is actually made with a bacteria which makes that sour flavor, that tangy flavor. And that bacteria is the same bacteria that's in our gut, a healthy gut bacteria that boosts our immune system, that helps us heal faster, and even helps our brain release the social hormone called oxytocin, which is what we get when we actually get a hug from somebody we love.
And fruit is another thing. You say that kiwi are excellent for our health, and we've been told to watch out for the fructose, to watch out for the sugar in fruit, but you say not so much.
You know, food is complicated, and it's too difficult to just reduce it to a single bad guy part of it. And so, you know, we all have to watch out for the amount of sugar that we eat, and some people actually need to be especially careful because they may have diabetes, for example. So, but fruits in general come with not only natural fruit sugars, but a lot of other things which include fiber and what we call bioactives. These are natural chemicals that when we eat them, they actually act in our cells in beneficial ways. For kiwi, it actually activates one of our health defense systems, that's our DNA protection. So our DNA can be damaged by the environment. You get sunshine, ultraviolet radiation, you get secondhand smoke that you breathe in, or even when you're at the filling station, if you can smell the fumes of the gas, those are toxins that can damage DNA.
Wow, so when we're pumping our gas, if we smell the gasoline fumes, we should maybe move?
I always stand upwind.
Oh.
So, but the trick is that we can't avoid these types of environmental harms, but research has shown that one kiwi a day will reduce the damage to DNA by about 60%. And if you have 3 kiwis a day, this was done in a clinical study, actually it will help the DNA repair itself by about 60%.
Used to be 1 apple a day, and now it's 1 kiwi a day. Well, you can see the entire interview, including more of the healthiest foods and drinks, by tuning in to Healthy Living. That's tonight at 9:30 right here on the CBN News Channel. After the break, a special day in Israel. What important anniversary is being celebrated there today? Stay tuned.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Well, it was 71 years ago today, May 14th, 1948, that Israel was declared its independence. Israelis celebrated last week according to the Hebrew calendar with dancing in the streets, picnics, and fireworks. Today is also another important anniversary. It's 1 year already since the U.S. moved its embassy to Jerusalem. President Trump defied conventional wisdom and followed through on his campaign promise to move the embassy, something 3 previous presidents failed to do. The move had been mandated by Congress in 1995, but allowed presidents to delay the move for national security reasons every 6 months.
This week, we will mark 1 year since the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. The official residence of the U.S. ambassador is also moving to Jerusalem. Thus, in effect, the congregational decision will be implemented. We very much appreciate this historical decision by President Trump, just as we very much appreciate his historic decision to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights.
Well, it's hard to believe it's already been a year. Well, events are planned this week to mark the 1 year anniversary. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of News Watch. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you'll join us next time. Until then, from all of us here, see you next time, and God bless.